Okay, everyone, welcome to a new podcast. The current working title is Growers Not Showers. We'll see how long we stick with that. But I'm here with my beautiful assistant, Camille. Camille, introduce yourself, mate.
Hi, my name's Camille. So yeah, a little bit of a background of what we're basically planning. So Jack's basically bringing me on as a co-coach. Very excited to be here. Mum, I made it. But yeah, so I've been coaching a little while now under Jack's wing, basically. I'm also an osteopath, so I'm in my fourth year now, just about to finish within the next couple months. So busy time. Yeah, Jack, I think saw something in me and decided to bring me on as an associate. So here we are.
Yeah, mate. Pretty much. I'm going to retire and just live through Camille now. This is pretty much the. I'm kidding. So today's episode, because kind of I don't know, it's a different podcast. For those of you that don't know, I run another podcast with Luke Schultz, Catabolic Window. It's not a huge podcast, so I imagine there's people who definitely don't know who I am. And Camille, obviously, because you're newer to coaching, there's going to be people who, unfortunately, they're missing out. They know who you are. So I think a bit of like a kind of Q&A, like meet the coaches, makes sense. So yeah, I've got some of the like these shitty, stupid questions that we've got. If we think of any questions off the cuff, we can go for that. But yeah, I think we'll just kind of start off with one of my favorite questions that I love to ask people. So Camille, I'm excited to hear your answer. But if you could coach any historical figure, right, who would it be?
That's such a difficult question.
You could, and we'll go for only one, just one person that you'd go for.
So me coaching them, not them coaching me. Me coaching them.
Yeah. You can do one that's a bodybuilder and one that's not a bodybuilder.
Lee Haney. It's got to be.
Yeah.
It's got to be Lee Haney. Like for me, like in terms of, I think what he brought to the stage in terms of aesthetics, but also size, is just he's the best bodybuilder in my eyes.
Yeah. What would you? Is there anything in particular like you just want to work with him, or are there like things you want to improve, or what?
No, it's just I think in terms of genetics, I think he's probably the best bodybuilder, at least for me personally. So I just want to work with him and just see, you know, because he did compete in a time where we've made some advancements in terms of training, nutrition, even anabolics to an extent. So it'd be interesting to see what I could bring to the table in terms of knowledge and how we'd execute in terms of his physique. But yeah, what about you?
In terms of bodybuilders, I don't know. Part of me immediately, my mind always jumps to Ronnie because I'm like, I want to see how big I could get him without him fucking himself up. But the thing is, he just didn't listen to people. Like, I know he went to, he went to, it was either an osteo, I think it was an osteo originally he went to, or a chiropractor, and they were like, bro, just stop everything you're doing. You need to fucking work on this. And he was like, okay, I don't like that. So he went to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor was like, yeah, you just need a few adjustments per week and you can keep on cracking on. And I think even the chiro was like, bro, don't squat. And he squatted that same day. So like, even if I said, Ronnie, mate, maybe we should be a bit smarter about this, I don't think he would have listened. I don't know. I think I'm drawn to people who are challengers. Like I think Lee Priest would be an interesting one because obviously he like his off seasons were awful, but also like he had such a big mouth, he'd get himself in shit with the IFBB. So I think I'd kind of like to almost be there to be like, Lee, I know you want to say this, mate, but pull yourself back. Hang on. I kind of want to be, because I think he had insane potential. So I think my role as a coach would literally just to kind of like speak for him and just be like, Lee, keep your fucking, like a lawyer, like Lee, keep your mouth shut, like take it on the chin, mate, keep on cracking on and see what he could do. What about a non-bodybuilder? I almost dropped my pen. What about a non-bodybuilder though? Anyone in human history you could coach within the realm?
No, maybe like Genghis Khan, like
bro,
greatest conqueror of all time, getting really fucking whammed. Like, I think it'd have to be like some sort of actor, because you see like these actors make absolutely nutty transformations, like Chris Hemsworth. Who's the guy who played in Batman as well? Chris Bateman. Like when he played in The Machine and he had to lose like 50 pounds and he became like thick skin, like absolute zero fat on him. And then he gained all that muscle to play in Batman again. Like that, like to me is ridiculous, like potential of bodybuilding genetics. So it'd be interesting to see like taking like an actor who demonstrates they obviously have the ability to put on muscle, they have good insertions, and seeing what you can do and play around with that.
Do you mean Christian Bale when you said Batman?
Christian Bale, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
it, yeah.
Mate, yeah, no, that's so true. He has clearly insane genetics. That's a really good point. My go-to answer is always Gandhi, just because like bro, the transformation you could pull off on that guy. I've never thought about that. An actor is so true. It's always weird, isn't it? Because even from like an anabolic standpoint, I think it's pretty clear actors use anabolics, right? Because of the time frame
Yeah.
they're doing is insane. But like even then, the shit they're able to pull it is insane. Like even they talk about things and they're like, oh yeah, chicken and rice. You look at their training, it's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. You look at their diet, it's like, okay, it's protein and carbs, it's fine. But you're like, I know so many people who do that and abuse gear and see nowhere near the same level of results. Like it's insane. Like the amount of great actors who also have incredible muscle building genetics. I don't know if there's a link between like because they're conventionally attractive and that kind of shows your like muscle building potential. I've got no idea. It's so mad. But like you take someone like Chris Hemsworth, who's kind of randomly successful in acting, and oh, by the way, he could also be a fucking nutty bodybuilder if he wanted to be, because he blows up so easily without even trying. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
Precisely. And I think people don't take that into account is when it talking about like genetics and bodybuilding per se. Everyone always talks about, your structure, your ability to respond to training, your consistency and your drive to an extent. But people don't talk about your ability to handle the drugs itself and stay healthy. Because like the most important thing for bodybuilding is longevity. It's how long you can do it for. And if you cannot handle the substances and stay relatively healthy, then A, you're going to end up fucking yourself up. You're taking years off your life. But B, you're just not going to be able to do the compounds for enough amount of time to see a substantial amount of progress.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think even like people who talk about Ronnie, they're like he would just come off cold turkey, calm. Like he could push heavy doses.
Yeah.
Like I've coached people in their early 20s. Soon as you put a little bit of DHT in there, their cholesterol just gets like fucked, absolutely shafted. You're like, oh, that's concerning. I've coached people who have come to me using a lot. You look at their bloods and you're like, crazy. How the fuck are you getting away with that? You look at some people, they just like look at a syringe and their fucking markers go fucked. Like, I think being able to handle drugs, your response to drugs it's like a ratio, isn't it? Like your response to drugs compared to how damaging they are to you is so overlooked. But I think again, because like it's probably not as important as the other factors. Like if you're a really good natural, you kind of multiply that with drugs, you're probably going to be a very good enhanced person. But still, you get people like Nick Walker who weren't great natural and then just fucking
or Kevin Leone is a prime example of when people say, oh yeah, I hyper respond to gear. It's like, no, like if you hyper respond to gear, you would know. Would know. Like Kevin Leone is the prime example. But
mate, 100%. Like he used to take 6 months off, didn't he? Was that Kevin Leone?
Yeah. And then he'd only hop on, I think it was like 6 or 8 weeks like before the Olympia. People would look at him and be like, oh nah, he's not even going to place top 6. And then in the final week they do like a guest pose and then he just looks completely stupid.
Hey, to be fair, that leads on to a topic I think is overlooked a lot. And that's like having a bit of psychological flexibility in bodybuilding. I was talking to a mate of mine recently about this, and like I think in the UK scene especially, there's a big pressure to be like 100% on it all of the time. And like when you look at top bodybuilders, they had periods of more flexibility. Like, I mean, Kevin, extreme example, coming completely off and just being like, I don't want to be a bodybuilder for like most of the year. But I mean, even if you look at like top competing pros now in their off season, they'll say like, oh, if it was prep, I wouldn't do this, but it's the off season, so I can. But I think there's a lot of pressure for people to treat off seasons like prep. Do you know what I mean?
100%. But I do also think, contrary to that point, is back then the bodybuilders didn't have the necessary steps in to manage like burnout, especially after comp. Well, regardless of whatever the reason was, maybe like it was in terms of the anabolics or blasting too much, or the nutrition, whatever it was. Like as an athlete, you need to have things in place to help you manage burnout and help you manage fatigue. I think nowadays, because it's become more about the psychology things and people are more educated, especially the coaches,
Yeah.
how important the psychology of the athlete is, especially after a show, right? We all know post-show, everything goes to shit. Post-show diet is significantly harder than prep diet because you're going to rebound. There's nothing to keep you in place from saying, oh, no, I've got show, so I can't eat that biscuit, you know? So it's like, you need to have the necessary things in place to help you manage those things. And I'm not saying, you know, completely be on it as if you're prep the entire year, but you need to still maintain some level of, like, I wouldn't say dedication, but consistency, because the unfortunate reality of being a bodybuilder is it's a full year-long commitment. It's not like football where you're in season, you might do 8 or 9 months of the league, and then, you know, you get 3 months off. You get time off to an extent, but you need, because of how important every single day is in order to achieve your goals, you need to maintain some level of consistency.
Yeah, that's a very good point, to be fair. Like, you need to give yourself, I think it depends on the person, because some people just never give themselves enough push, and so it's like, you don't need more flexibility, you need more drive. But then you also end up with people who have almost guilt about any element of flexibility, and that's where, like, it really depends on the person, and that's where you need someone to kind of help you with, like, here's the boxes you need to tick those, and then you're calm. Like, if you want to, like, if I'm in a gaining phase and my mates are at the pub, I can go and have a pint or two and it's calm. If I'm deep in a diet, I'm maybe not going to make that same kind of decision. But I think, like you said, and that's where, like, managing your burnout is really important. And it depends on, bodybuilding is like year long. It depends where you're drawing the line, you know, like how hard on yourself you're being. If you're like in an off-season setting, or if you're in a bulk and you're like, I really want cream of rice, but the plan says rice, so I'm going to have fucking rice, you're going to burn yourself out. You know what I mean? But like, if you are equally like, oh, I'm in a gaining phase now, I don't need food, I don't need a meal plan, I don't even need my fitness pal, I'll just fucking do whatever. It's like, yeah, well, that's not bodybuilding either.
100%. I think something, sorry, whatever you were going to say.
Go on. I was just go for it.
Yeah, something like people always hear me rave on about, and it's why I love connecting the line between osteopathy and bodybuilding, is the word holisticism. Looking at it as a whole, right? And it's looking at every single person individually. There is no right or wrong answer for everyone. I'll see you talking about this all the time, where it's like using templates and stuff like that. There is no right or wrong answer for any single person. Every single person is going to have a different training idea, different ways they enjoy training. Nutrition wise, you know, foods they don't like, they do like, foods they digest better, stuff like that. And psychology as well is super important. Every single person has different why. Every single person has things they find easier to maintain and harder to maintain. For example, like training is, for me personally, always going to be at a high level maintained throughout the entire year, whether I'm in prep, deep into a bulk, just coming out, you know, of a mini cut, whatever. Training is always going to be 100% because that's what I enjoy the most. Nutrition wise, that's something that I will struggle a lot more with maintaining, but that just comes down purely to what I am as a person, what I enjoy doing and not doing. Some people might come from a background, you know, where they struggled with nutrition for years and years and years, right? They were really overweight or obese, they struggled with health, so their nutrition is key. They do not struggle with it because they have that why, right? They came from a position where they struggled with it so much. So you don't need to give them a kick up the arse in order to make sure their nutrition is tip of the top. But like, their training might be a bit limited. They might, you know, miss some days. They might not enjoy training as much. So it's about being tailored towards the client and being like, okay, they need help with this rather than this. And understanding not every single client is going to have the same needs and wants.
100%, man. Like, everyone's got their own strengths and weaknesses, and again, coming back to that, like, flexibility point or that compromise point, someone's idea of flexibility is going to, like, vary. So like, for me and you, like, balls to the wall training is like fun and enjoyable, so we can keep that in year round. Like, I think definitely for me, the hardest part I found historically was always food. Like, especially early years, I really struggle with food. And so usually, like, the kind of way that I run things now is I kind of run a hybrid between having like a meal plan and macros, particularly when I'm not dieting. When I'm dieting, meal plan, just fucking, like, I don't want to know, just meal plan, meal plan, meal plan. But as soon as it gets into a gaining phase, if I just run a meal plan, everything gets so boring for me, because it's like, you get a check-in, you get more food, I don't give a shit. Like, it's just more rice. Why, like, actually, why do I care?
Mm,
Whereas
exactly.
if you say, here's an extra 200 calories, you can have more rice, or you can have a banana, or you can have some fucking honey, or you can have this, or you can have that. Like, being able to kind of like play around with my food a little bit more in a gaining phase, I enjoy. Like, this morning, usually I'd have a meal and then my pre-workout meal. But I wasn't that hungry, so I was like, right, I'll just save that food for later on in the day, and that's calm.
100%, 100%. I don't know where you came from in your background, but like when I started going to the gym, I was ridiculously skinny.
Yeah.
Like I was shredded. Like, I had zero body fat. But I was.
Sorry, give me 1 sec. I think that's someone at my door.
That's all right. He's gone. He's disappeared. He's probably got an Amazon package.
Sorry, mate. I thought my fucking my missus was on it, and then I went, and then I realized that she was, but then I had to hold the door open. Mate, what a palaver! Fucking hell. We'll edit that out. We'll edit that out. But anyway, go on, mate. What were you saying?
I kind of forgot what I was saying, to be honest. I got a bit of a brain fart.
I was talking about flexibility, and you were like, depends on what your background is, whether you struggle with nutrition.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. So I was going to say, like, coming on to the next question I was going to ask you is a little bit about your background and like what got you into bodybuilding and why did you do it?
Oh, that's a good question. I fell into the gym because of, like, me and Camille went to the same school, but we're in different years. And like at sixth form at our school, they had like in PE, you could go to the gym and like kind of like do that instead. I think it was like every other week or something. And my mates went to the gym, and then like most people who went to the gym, they just go home. They just like walk home. But I was like, oh fuck it, I might as well give it a go. Like, it'll be quiet, whatever. Give it a go. Got hooked. My mom was big into the gym. She still is really big into the gym. And so I kind of thought, like, well, if she likes it, I'm probably gonna like it, like, genetically. So I gave it a go. Really liked it. Trained for a while. And then I had a mate called Dan who was bodybuilding at the time. And then I trained with him a couple of times, and I was talking to him, and I was like, okay, shit, I get this. I want this. Like, this is cool. And I kind of like fell into it more and more and more. I think the thing for me was like, I never really saw myself as someone with a really good physique. So, but I'm quite like organized. I like things to be quite like structured. So it basically was like, when I got into the gym, I was like, okay, I should probably figure out what I'm doing with my training. And then when I was like, okay, well, if I'm doing that, I should probably like figure out my food. And then I started to just kind of like, before even knowing what bodybuilding was, I was like tracking my food, and I was tracking my training. And I was like, okay, this is fun. This is enjoyable. And then I just kind of like realized what I was doing was already kind of bodybuilding. I just didn't have the goal of stepping on stage. And then I kind of got more and more excited about getting leaner and getting on stage. And yeah, I think for me, it's like just wanting to be someone with a really cool physique that people look at and go, that's cool. Obviously, over time now, it's like I kind of want to be freaky with my physique and want people to be, fuck is that? But yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it was just like wanting to like, it was that the things that I enjoyed doing gave me a result that I really enjoyed. And a lot of like, I would look in the mirror and be like, where the fuck did that come from? And I felt like a lot of respect for myself for doing it, because it was not I never thought of myself as someone who would have a good physique. Do you know what I mean? I mean, what's your background in terms of like what got you into training and bodybuilding?
I mean, I'd love to think of some absolute villain arc story of why I started going to the gym. It was because of heartbreak. Like, I ended up breaking up with my missus at the time. Just lockdown just hit. So I was just thinking like, oh, what am I gonna do? Like, a little heartbroken Camille. Turns out my mate Luca, he had a garage basically. We had a bunch of weights and a barbell. I ended up training there for 6 months. And this is where my story diverges a little bit, because I love to say like the conventional, oh no, like I really struggled to grow muscle at the beginning, but you know, I put in the time and effort and the knowledge to do that. I didn't. Like I responded to training ridiculously quickly. I squatted 4 plates within 3 months of squatting, like just
Oh,
stuff like that. My physique grew so quickly, like from the get-go. So I kind of knew I had good genetics. Where my story kind of diverges is I struggled a lot with like perfectionism and comparing myself to people I shouldn't be comparing myself to. I herniated my disc when I was a little bit younger, about 15, 16, which caused myself to have a bit of scoliosis with my spine. For those of you that don't know, scoliosis is like a lateral curve in the spine where it deviates. As I got older and older, I didn't do anything about it. I didn't do any rehab, and it really, really got to me. The thing about bodybuilding is perfectionism. It's, you know, how symmetrical you are, your muscle bearing insertions, you know, stuff like that. And I got into my own head, like psychologically, like, oh, if only my spine was straight, I'd be such a good bodybuilder. Or if only this fucking insertion was equal as the other one, I'd be such a good bodybuilder. And I had such an unhealthy relationship with training for the first 2-3 years. Instead of sitting down and just being like, do you know what? Come on, like you have good genetics for this. Just don't get into your own head. I kind of just played around with it. I had phases where I didn't go to the gym at all because I hated the way I look. And then I'd go from not doing anything to giving it absolutely 100%. And it's just that constant swinging of left to right that really fucked me up. And this is, again, going back to osteopathy and why I love osteopathy so much. It's there's different types of scoliosis, right? So there's a functional scoliosis, which basically means due to tightness or imbalances of strength in the muscles, it can cause an appearance of a lateral curvature in your spine. And then there's also structural scoliosis, which basically means anatomically the bones are shaped, so they're laterally curved. I had someone do an assessment on me, and they basically deemed that I had functional scoliosis due to the herniation in my spine, which basically meant that there was something I could do about it. And in the past 2 months, bearing in mind I'm now 4 to 4.5 years into the gym, only in the past 2 months where I've been really working with someone, being like, oh no, you've got imbalances in these sort of muscles, I need to stretch this, and this. I've been able to really influence my scoliosis to the point where now it's literally barely visible. And it just comes to show like how much emphasis you put on things that are out of your control could have an influence on your psychology, but in reality, it's not that deep. Yeah. And the thing that matters about bodybuilding is no matter how you feel, just keep going. It's the people that do it for the longest amount of time that get the best results. You have to learn to give 100%, and you have to learn to love the journey rather than the outcome. Don't look at your physique, but look at, you know, your lifestyle, the way you train, the ambition and the determination it gives you on a day-to-day basis. It's like for bodybuilders, you know, you might train, you might get your 5 meals a day, but what else are you doing in the day? You know, you can't just be bodybuilding. You know, for us, you know, we're trying to grow a business. I'm doing my osteopathy. You've got a clothing brand as well. So we're still doing other things. And it's that carryover from bodybuilding. It's the ideologies that we've learned from bodybuilding that we're now implementing in every other aspect of life that really, really have a benefit. But yeah, that's kind of my background and how I came to be, I guess.
Mate, that still that like relates to that kind of that flexibility thing we were talking about. It's like when all the boxes are ticked, it's like you got work, your osteo, your clothing, whatever the fuck you got going on. And like when those boxes are ticked, it's like do whatever. Like recently I bought myself like a PS5 and Black Ops 6. And like that's where like my final bit of downtime goes. Like I'm not gonna like, I think a lot of people feel pressure to like once they're fucking, you know, done with whatever. It's like I was talking to one of my clients, Lou, about this. I'm sure he won't mind me saying it. He's like he'll go for a walk and he'll be like he'll feel guilty if he doesn't listen to like the J3 podcast. Like if he's doing cardio, he'll be like, I have to listen or watch something bodybuilder. If he's meal prepping, he's like, I feel like I have to watch someone else meal prep or watch someone else train or like, you know, learn something. I'm like, mate, that's the thing. You can't just like that's where you're going a little bit too far into things. Like you've done the training, you've done the food, you've done the steps, you've done the cardio. You don't need to make your downtime about bodybuilding. Like once you've ticked those off, mate, like go and fucking watch something stupid, like go and watch TV, watch a movie, play video games, like whatever, it doesn't matter. Like there's a time and a place, like a particular rest day if you're not training. Maybe replace some of that time with like something, but you don't need to fucking like force yourself to be 100% bodybuilder all the time. Like, I mean, you look at like James Hollingshead's a great example. He will eat and then COD all day and then eat and then play more COD and then eat and then train and then eat and then play COD. Like he does 3 things. He eats, he trains, he plays COD. Like because he's so relaxed about it, he doesn't miss a beat. He's still an insane bodybuilder. If you ask him, are you a bodybuilder? He'd be like, yeah. And you'd be like, well, but you're playing COD. And he'd be like, yeah, what else am I going to do? Sit and stare at the wall? Like, it doesn't matter what I do right now, you know? And I think that's where having that bit of flexibility is important, mainly from your mindset. I think just like if we were sat here on this podcast, like just fucking itching, like when's my next meal, when's my next training, like that's cool, but you can put so much pressure on yourself. Like after this podcast, I'll eat my pre-meal, I'll train. Like, I'm not gonna be, do you know what I mean? I'm not just gonna have it like living rent in my head. It's just like something that I do when I enjoy. I'm not gonna miss a beat about it. When I get in the gym, I'm gonna fucking send it. But I'm not gonna like be thinking about it before I go to bed. I'm not gonna wake up thinking about it unless like I'm really excited. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I think people put too much mental pressure on something that you should be enjoying. Just because right now I'm not thinking about what I'm training doesn't mean that it's not going to be a fucking incredible session. Just because when I'm on the car, like driving on my way there, just because I'm listening to like whatever music and I'm not like fully got my head on, doesn't matter. Doesn't mean I can't get it on in the gym. Do you know what I mean? It's the same for like when I'm meal prepping my food. I don't need to listen to like Food I Bayad's podcast. I can go watch something about fucking Pokemon. It doesn't matter, you know.
Yeah, and I think I'll hear it time and time again. I think Mike Israetel or Dr. Mike Israetel said it the best is the best bodybuilders are the ones that get the meals in, do the training, and go home and they fucking rest. Like they play games, they watch shows, they sit down and they do fuck all. Like cortisol as a hormone is such a large influence on how you feel, on your physique, actually how it looks. So managing cortisol is incredibly, like you look at the best bodybuilders and like you'll see like what are they doing in their prep. They'll minimize, you know, their business and stuff, and they'll put it on the backseat because their time to relax is, I'd argue, even more important than the time they spend training or this time they spend eating. And I saw that in myself when we were prepping for this photo shoot, and that 1 week where I went absolutely hyper, I was like, mate, shit started going out the window. I was like, oh, I signed up to kickboxing. I was like, oh, I'm doing the wrong sport. I should be a kickboxer. I didn't want to train. Like literally, my head just went completely off the rails. This is my next question to you. Actually, what I was going to ask you is the first time you prepped. Do you have any like horror stories or funny stories of how you felt basically?
The first time I got like really fucking lean, yeah, I think to be fair, I probably kind of went through all of the cycles that like everyone goes through of like feeling awful and just kind of like getting used to that and just being like, yeah, if it's 3 p.m. I'm just fucked. Waking up and feeling like you haven't slept and being like, oh my God, I've got to get through today. Obviously like impulse purchases, because you're so like, I think the biggest thing is like you're so deprived of dopamine because nothing really feels good. Like even though you're like still working and doing stuff that you like I would feel so tired I just wouldn't like want to watch TV or even movies. Like my attention span was so short, so I try and like fill that void, but like I would abuse TikTok and Instagram reels, and then like probably like I would spend way too much time looking at soft drinks to buying creatine and pre just to like taste something, like fucking buying expensive clothes and shit and then instantly regretting it and then feeling good for a day when you have them. Like, yeah, I think it's funny. I definitely had a moment of like, shit, I can't do that. Like, I don't think I can do this forever. Like when you're so beaten up from a diet and you're like coming to the end of it and your coach is like, okay, what we're going to do in the push-up is this, but with more food. You're like, oh, kill me. Like, I can't do it. Like, I remember being like, bro, I want an untracked meal every evening. I don't want to ever do cardio. I'm not tracking my steps. Like, mate, I'm going to train twice a week and then like enjoy the free time. Obviously, when food went in, I was like, nah, fuck all that. But it's so funny the things that you think that you want to do when you're in that headspace. I remember being like, bro, I need to have an untracked dinner every day. Like I can't do this. Like I need breakfast, lunch, dinner with the people around me and then snacks. But like as soon as like I got a bit more food in, I felt good. I was like, no, actually I enjoy my fucking routine. I enjoy this. Same with like cardio. I was like, actually I kind of miss doing cardio. Can we keep a little bit of cardio in? And when you enjoy training more, I was like, I want to train more. But yeah, I think, you know, I kind of had the usual response to prep. I think the main one that stood out to me was in the pre-prep diet when I walked the dog. I was so I feel like, have you heard me tell this story about when I got stuck on a dog walk?
No.
Oh, mate. So I was walking the dog. It was quite late, and my missus was out. I think she was at work, and I walked him like halfway into like where I live. It was like half an hour into the park. You know where I live. Like, there's a big park.
Yeah.
I walked like half an hour there, and then I was so fucked, like so tired. I was dragging my feet so much. There was like this hill, and I was like, I don't think I can make it home. I genuinely was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I was like, I felt myself welling up, like I was gonna cry, and I was like, I'm gonna have to call my missus and be like, come here and pick and like take the dog home, and then come back and walk me home. Like, bear in mind that like she is a walking stick herself, so I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm gonna call my mum. I'm gonna call an ambulance. Like, and I like had to like sit down for a second, and then I was panicking because I sat down and I was like, I don't know if I can stand up again. So I'll be like, shit. So eventually I stood up and I was like listening to a bodybuilding podcast because I was like, come on, get the fuck through this. I had to psych myself up to walk home. It took me twice as long, but eventually I fucking made my way home and I was so relieved. I was like, oh my God. But yeah, I remember, to be fair, I used to procrastinate sitting down. If I came in after training and I sat down too quickly, I wouldn't be able to move. I'd be like, I would postpone sitting down for like when I'd done everything that I needed to do on my feet. So I would like come in, work standing up, take the dog for a walk, do the washing up, and then sit down and then just like be unable.
Yeah, I think we've had this conversation before where it's like in any sport, there's a specific moment where you realize you go from just being a regular person who does that sport to being like a competitor. For me in bodybuilding, it's going through prep. The same like for fighters, the first time you get in a fight and you get fucked up or you get knocked out, that's the point where you realize like that's the hardest it's gonna get.
Yeah.
And that's something that you said to me when I was in fucking when I went hypo, where you were like, this is the hardest it's going to get. It's not going to get harder than this. And that was such a comforting feeling because you have to lose your head at some point to realize whether this is for you. Yeah. I had to lose my head. I had to go through those doubts and be like, this is not for me. I can't do this. I can't do this. For me to then get through it, look back at it and be like, oh, you know, actually I could do it again. Like I could change this, this and this. And like, we've had so many conversations just like, you immediately after you get out of it and that little bit of glycogen back into my brain, now it's functioning properly. I was like, okay, I could change this though. Or, you know, next time we're not going to drive, 1,600 calories because I cut too quick. Like stuff like that. And it's like, it's like in any sport, it's taking the best out of the scenario and you telling that, that's the hardest going to get. It was such a comforting feeling. Honestly, it wouldn't have got me through it otherwise.
That's the thing though. That's what you need to hear is like, you get to a point where you're just so head fucked. And I think the biggest worry is like, I feel like this now, how am I going to feel in X amount of weeks time? And it's like, you reach a point where you're so fucked, you don't really get any worse. It's just, you stay there for a little bit longer. But like,
just fucked. Like,
but often when you stop and you take a second and you think, you're like, actually things aren't that bad. It's just very easy to like I think it's a mixture of like you're so fatigued, your emotions are out of whack, you can't quite think straight, so it makes everything that you're doing feel so much worse because you're in that state. And so sometimes you just need to kind of be like, okay, you know what, like this is, I remember I was like, this is the hardest it's going to get, you're doing it, like this is prep, like well done, like you're doing it, like this is the hardest you're ever going to work, like it does not get any harder than this. And I think when you tell yourself, I'm doing it, like this is it, like, oh, I'm fucking nailing it right now, it's very reassuring because you're like, okay, what I'm feeling is worth it and it is, going to pay off. But it's like you said, is when you're in prep, you're thinking about all the ways you want to pull back. You're like, I want to stop training, I want to stop doing this, I want to kind of move more into this. You're kind of like trying to run away from bodybuilding, but as soon as you get a little bit more food in you, you're already thinking like, okay, I could
run them back.
Yeah, you're already like, okay, actually, we could have done this smarter. We could have kept the food a little bit higher. We could have drove training performance higher. We could have done volume. We could have pushed forward. I remember I finished my pre-prep diet and I was like, actually, I probably could have done an hour of cardio daily. And I was kind of like, okay, I probably couldn't have done steps. Food, I maybe could have taken lower on rest. I remember just thinking like, I wonder what I could do to improve. As soon as you get like out of that mindset, you're already thinking like, what could I do next time? And that kind of feeds into, but that is bodybuilding. It's like that self-mastery, isn't it? Of like knowing knowing what you can do better, and you learn from the previous time you were in that phase what you could do to kind of carry yourself forward more.
And I think for me as well, the training was such, like, to an extent, but I really enjoyed training when I was really cut. There was something like, I had a different feeling when I'd take a set and I'd progress a set being at that sort of body fat percentage. Like, I remember I did Bulgarians. Like, I never really programmed them, but we started programming them at the beginning of the cut.
Yeah.
And I only really started progressing them when I was like really, really lean, and I got up to 110 kilos, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I would not be able to do this when I was bulked up, let alone like the body fat percentage that I am now. And like, going on to my next point of, you need to keep training. Oh, sorry, my bad. That's my phone. Yeah, you need to keep training ridiculously fun in the cut. Like, you cannot have any exercises that you dread doing and going into the gym and be like, oh fuck, I have to do, I don't know, Bulgarians, or I have to do RDLs or stuff like that. For me, I noticed that for my push sessions, for example, I would put so much emphasis on my dumbbell presses, my incline dumbbell presses, that if I got shit set, it ruined the entire session. There's no point of doing that, right? Because you're putting emphasis on one exercise when you're doing, you know, 6, 7, 8, or even 9 exercises a session. And if I have that exercise as the first one as well, it would just ruin my entire flow for the rest of the session.
Yeah.
So it's about smart programming. If there's an exercise that you see yourself psychologically putting more of an influence on, you see it like physically downing you for the rest of the session, why is it in there? Why is it in there? Because it's taken away from everything else. And if you just swapped it out temporarily, you don't have to, you know, run up this different exercise. For example, if you swapped a dumbbell incline press for some sort of convergent machine press, you don't have to run that up for forever, but it's a phase, and it's mapping out phases in bodybuilding, right? But yeah.
100%, man. I think the most overlooked aspect of bodybuilding, ironically, is training, and the influence that good training has on a physique, on your ability to progress, on your ability to create a deficit and just change. Like, I saw it in myself in the pre-prep, and I've seen it in other clients where, like, you don't see a big shift in body weight, but because you're able to keep training in a good balance and you're able to progress well, you see drastic shifts. Like, I remember, like, in the pre-prep, I probably only dropped like 20 pounds, but visually it looked like 30, 35, 40. Like, I remember looking at the pictures and being like, why the fuck? I've never, like, usually for me, I have to take a big shift in scale weight to see any kind of visual change. Like, dropping the first 5 pounds, I looked drastically different. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And strength was going through the roof. Like, I was enjoying the process. Everything was good. I was looking forward to training. And I think, like you said, that's so, so key, because training is the main driver that we have, right? Like, the food is just there to fuel it. It's so easy to get caught up in, I think people do it time and time again, it's so easy to get caught up in, like, chasing condition, chasing new lows, chasing scale weight. And while that's cool, you need to do it with the asterisk of training staying in a good spot. If you ever have to sacrifice training for that, that kind of tells you, okay, maybe timelines were a little bit fucked, maybe we're rushing. You know, like, for you, we only really had 1 week of pushing a bit too hard, and that's because the week before we were like, this is going well, pushed you hard for a week, pulled you back out, and you look better anyway. Like, your coverage is the best you've ever looked, and it's peak strength, and your fatigue's being managed well, recovery is good. Like, this is what we want. Like, you could easily grow from this standpoint, because I know that you're not really going to have an issue with, like, splurging on food or training absolutely fucking you, because we've built a good balance. Like, I think training and the value of training and keeping training productive is so, so overlooked. But I think particularly for natural bodybuilders as well, because it's easy to understand in an enhanced person. Yeah, you could recomp quite aggressively during a diet, but, like, no, you can see, like, natural lifters, if you're on it with your fucking training, like, the difference is ridiculous. The reason that you've got, like, leaner and leaner and leaner without getting flatter and looking shit or awful, or, like, you've easily maintained all of your muscle mass, if not built some, is because training has fucking flown the entire time. Like, I think particularly the beginning phase after this is going to be ridiculously productive, because the prep has been ridiculously productive in terms of growth already. Like, it's insane.
I think people don't understand, like, the differences between natural bodybuilding and enhanced bodybuilding, and the fact there is little to no difference. Like, you whether you are enhanced or you're natty, what you're doing day to day should not change. You should still be getting all your meals in.
Yep.
You should still be training ridiculously hard. Like the only thing that changes would be the fact that you're on PEDs. And like that, I say this time and time again, like your training intensity is the single thing that's driving hypertrophy. It's how hard you train. You could train like an absolute ape, like literally be slinging the weight around. You'll see it time and time again with influencers like Sam Sulek and stuff.
Yeah.
Not saying that he trains poorly, but if he came to me, I'd be like, say that again?
It could be better.
But it could be better.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the most important thing of driving hypertrophy is the intensity. And so my next question to you is so on the scale of left and right, being science-based lifting, meathead analogy, where are you sort on that scale? Are you tilted towards one side or are you bang in the middle?
It's so hard to say. The way that I see it is like lean towards what, like, I don't know. I don't like the phrase science-based. Like, I like when science kind of lines up with like anecdotally what people have said. So like the recent stuff on like stretch, a lot of people were touting that a long time ago. If you look at a lot of old school bodybuilders, a lot of them were all about stretch. A lot of them, again, control. A lot of them were about controlling the weight. Not everyone, but like you definitely see that in people. So cool. Again, like high protein intakes maybe being more beneficial. Again, I know a lot of people who like 5 or so years ago were really praising that. And it's like, okay, that's cool to see. The way that I see it is like, we have this general idea of like what tends to work the best. I want to get someone as close to that as possible without completely killing the process for them. But like, so you again, like for myself, training with reps in reserve could mean higher volume. Cool. Maybe that means a little bit more growth. But to me, that process is just so unengaging that I don't want to do that. But I don't think, again, I think leaning towards someone's strengths and what they do enjoy is always going to give more progress. Like, again, comes down to that training enjoyment. If you took a version of me that loved reps in reserve, maybe he'd grow better, but I am not that version. I do not enjoy that, so I don't want to do it. You know, I think, again, the same with like, I tend to keep things as stretch focused as I can. But for me, if I do it too stretch focused, I run into injuries. So I don't do it all the time. I'll try to run volume as high as I can, but again, I run into injuries. So I have to be careful with that. Like, it's all about kind of knowing, okay, this probably is a good idea. This probably is less of a good idea. But it all comes down to how much do you enjoy what you're doing. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think both training like an animal and training smart, they don't exist without each other. It's like yin and yang. So you cannot build muscle without training with some sort of intensity, and you cannot build muscle without training with some sort of structure.
Yeah.
Right. To what extent you want to be on that scale, whether you want to go to the left or to right, it doesn't really matter. From a client's perspective, I'd edge on the side of having the mentality of a meathead and worry about the training and nutrition and everything else to someone else, like a coach or someone that knows their shit, right? The mentality that you adopt in the gym, I think, speaking for you and for myself, when I first started going to the gym, I was completely meathead. Just put as much weight on, fucking lift heavy shit, grunt like an animal, just like, but it's that ability to channel that mindset into your sets. That's ultimately what grows. And like, you look at all the best bodybuilders, you know, they might not have the best training ideologies or, you know, even to extent the best nutrition, but like they all train to failure, every single one of them, or at least approximately close to failure. And it's time and time again, you have to just train with that intensity. You have to take a set and be like, do you know what, I'm struggling here. It's going to be painful. It's not going to feel nice, but I'm going to do it anyway, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think, again, it comes down to like training needs to be hard. It needs to be progressive. It needs to be hard, and it needs to be something that you enjoy. And we will still, like, it's exactly that. Like, I'm still thinking every single set, how fucking strong can I get at this? But I'm not thinking the way that I used to think when I first started the gym, which was like quarter reps, fucking fling it about, do whatever. Like, there's certain things that are a given. Like, if I'm going to dumbbell press, I'm going to go slow. I'm going to make sure my shoulder feels okay. And I'm going to try and touch that dumbbell to my chest. But as long as I'm doing that, I'm asking the question, okay, how fucking strong can I get at these? Again, like, I'm not gonna. I'm also, because I'm quite fucking injury prone. I'm not gonna jump 5 or 10 kilos, so I might only go up a dumbbell size. But then I'm thinking, okay, well, a strong person is gonna move the 52s for like 12. So if I've got the 50s for 10 and that feels fucking easy, I'm not going to jump to 55s or 60s and go for a low repper. I'm still going to do something strong, which is slightly heavier, but a ton more reps. So there's still a few things that like I have to caveat, but I'm still going to be like, right, how fucking strong can I get this? And again, if I see that I'm cutting the range of motion, that's not what a strong person does. That's not strong. If I'm rushing the rep, that's not strong either. Like truly mastering it is strong. So I'm still asking, how fucking strong can I get at this? And I'm still going into sets with like real intensity and grit and like trying to hype myself up for them. But again, like I enjoy that. Like I don't, the hardest part of the set is the most fun, like going to failure, and like particularly on leg training. So I'm not going to deliberately hold back on that unless I have like a real reason to, and I don't really want to do that. So yeah, like 100%, you kind of need, it's like you have this pre-flight checklist of like, okay, as long as I do these 3 things, I'm going to just fucking send it. As long as I do these 3 things, you know?
Exactly. And managing injuries as well. Like obviously this is going to come from a biased perspective because of my background of osteopathy and stuff like that. But it's so underlooked. Like people, you know, love training. They'll train like an absolute animal. Cool, fine, whatever. They'll do the nutrition because it influences the training and how much they enjoy their training. If they're eating like shit, their training will be like shit. Cool, fine, whatever. They'll do their training. But managing lifestyle, managing rehab, stuff like that, you know, even stretching, it's so overlooked.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Like for me, I notice I have ridiculously tight shoulders, right? Even a little bit internally rotated due to just posture, like postural habits just from sitting, stuff like that. So I noticed like when I start stretching, specifically my pec minor or the second pec muscle in the chest, which is responsible for when it's tight, internally rotating the shoulders, like my pressing just became, A, it felt significantly better, but B, my chest actually grew a little bit just from that. Not even grew, but just appeared better, right? So bodybuilding is about appearing as best as you can look, and you know, like stretching and having that correct posture will have such an influence on how your physique looks just from a day-to-day basis. And also going back to the point of, you know, if you're doing the correct run, you're keeping your chest proud on sort of pressing movements, or you're allowing your shoulders to protract on upper back movements, stuff like that. But if you don't have that range of motion available to you to work within that, you're just leaving gains on the table. But
yeah, the biggest thing for me is like, I think because my background is like I've got everything going against me for bodybuilding. Like my digestion's super picky, chronic injury issues. Those are the 2 main things I struggle with. So for me, kind of like that's something that I'm always applying to my clients. So if there is digestive issues, I understand the impact that has on growth, and it is measurable. So I'm always going to be like, okay, let's get digestive issues cleared up for anyone. If someone comes to me with picky digestion, I'm going to be like, right, we need to be on this. Same thing with injuries. Like if someone's got injury risk or a history of injuries, or even if what we're doing on paper is slightly more injurious, I'm going to be very, very careful because, and again, this is where my issue with always making things length and focus comes in. Like if you can run a length and focus press of all your pressing for 6 months, cool, that's 6 months of more growth. But then if that pisses off your AC joint, or that starts to tweak your rotator cuff, you get a little bit of tendonitis building up in there, and then you're having to do 6 months of rehab, 6 months of limited ROM pressing, 6 months of limited load pressing, like I've definitely had to do, then it's like, okay, well, you've got 6 months of really productive, 6 months of holding on to what you've got. You could have just gone for like 12 months, 18 months, 24 months of making a few trade-offs for long-term growth. I think injury prevention is so overlooked because it's like, just because today's session was as productive as you could have made it, doesn't mean, like, I think when people say productive, they forget about the fallout. Like if your push session was really fucking good on paper, but then the next day you're sore in your like fucking GH joint, not great. That's not good at all. Like that should not be happening. Shouldn't be getting joints on. Same with like your leg day. If you're like, yeah, fantastic length and bias quad work, and then you wake up the next day like, oh, my knees, my hips, my ankles, like that's not good, because that's going to build up over time. So even taking away that stimulus on a given day can kind of give you so much more. I kind of refer to it as like monoset hypertrophy versus like polyset hypertrophy. Like people thinking about, okay, on this one set, how can I make it as growth promoting as possible? I think that's very short-sighted. You need to think about this block, this week, this fucking mesocycle, this year. If I'm going to run this for a year, how can I make this year as productive as possible? And that's going to be trade-offs to go, okay, if I'm going to hit the squat press, maybe I don't go stupidly low reps on all my sets, but I do it where I can. If I'm going to do a hack, maybe I do reverse band it. Or if I don't want to reverse band it, maybe I really fucking hammer the leg extensions prior. Like sometimes you have to make these small little tweaks and trade-offs because for you, they keep you in the game for so much longer. And like you wouldn't really purposefully choose to go against yourself with food, but people kind of do it for training. It's like if I'm lactose intolerant, so I'm not going to purposefully be like, oh, I need to consume whey every day because it's the best, highest quality and best digesting protein source. It's not for me. So why the fuck would I ever eat that? It's just going to cause me bloating, like distension, discomfort, poorer recovery, poorer protein uptake. It's going to cost me progress and I'm going to look worse for it. So why would I force myself to do that? But people tend to do the same thing with training. So yeah, 100%. It's so hugely overlooked within all aspects because people are just so focused on like, what can I do with this one set? And then you end up with a ton of injuries, you know, like fucking I have in the past. So I have to be a little of the way that I program. But just because there's ever so slightly potentially less stimulus doesn't mean you're still not going to grow like a fucking madman.
Yeah.
You know, particularly long term. Like if you compared me injured versus me training, but the training is slightly suboptimal, if you want to use that word, me training is going to beat me injured. Doesn't matter, you know?
Exactly. And it's like if you even grew a little bit for across a year compared to if you grew a shit ton over 6 months, but then 6 months you didn't grow anything.
Yeah.
If you compared those two physiques side by side, the one who grew a little bit over an extended period of time would have made more gains. And it goes back to the point of bodybuilding is about longevity and it's about managing all the external variables to make sure that you can do it for an extended amount period of time. Same thing with a bulk. How do we approach a bulk, right? We're like, okay, we're going to get you cut to a really good starting point and we're going to go from a minimal rate of gain so you're not putting on a shit ton of fat so we can do it for, guess what, as long as possible. We want to be in that phase because it's anabolic for as long as possible. And yeah, just going back to the injury thing, right? So there's without going into too much detail, there's 3 phases of an injury. So the first phase is inflammatory, second phase is proliferation, and third phase is remodeling. So in terms of the collagen fibers, when they get laid down, the collagen fibers originally, when you make a tear into a muscle or tendon, they get put down like this, basically in a not a uniform fashion. What happens if you don't do the rehab? The collagen fibers get replaced with stronger types. So it goes from type 3 to type 1, but it's still laid down in a not uniform fashion. So they're laid down like this. What does that do? It decreases the contractile property, it decreases the range of motion, and it makes you injury prone in that joint. So what does that mean? If you don't do the rehab, if you have got an injury, it makes you injury prone, not only in that specific joint, but in the surrounding joints due to the biomechanics. If there's a specific joint that has altered biomechanics and is not functioning properly, the other surrounding joints have to compensate. For example, if your shoulder's fucked, you might start getting problems in your neck. We call it regional interdependence. When a specific area is fucked, it might transfer to another one. Or even in your middle back, you might start getting some costochondritis because your ribs or stuff like that. So it's about managing your injuries as soon as you get them. Do not dilly-dally. Do not just brush them aside. Be like, oh yeah, do you know what? I'm going to get better. Because chances are you're not. Unless, you know, you're a genetic female that recovers from absolutely anything, you can beat your body up on a day-to-day basis. Make sure you stay on top of it because ultimately it will come and bite you in the ass if you're not.
Yeah, 100%. And on that bombshell, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Growers Not Showers, episode 1. He's been Camille.
First of many.
Yeah, exactly. He's been Camille. I've been Jack. If you want to inquire with either one of us, Camille will be at Camille_Archer Academy on Instagram. I will be Jack_Archer Academy on Instagram. Camille, give us a rundown of kind of who you specialize and who you help.
Well, I'll work with any type of athletes. You know, I personally enjoy working with bodybuilders, but I also do specialize, you know, in terms of rehab and stuff like that. And then one point I want to get across is if you are struggling with an injury, don't let it be the reason that it's not allowing you to go to the gym. There are things that you can always implement, even in terms of training, like Jack said, you can work around the injuries in order so you can still reach your goals. So do not be afraid to reach out.
Yeah. Camille, injury specialist there, and mainly works with hypertrophy people. I mean, we both mainly work with hypertrophy people. I myself, I work with lifestyle people interested in building muscle, same as Camille. Bodybuilders, same as Camille, but also work with a lot of coaches and coaching education through an academy. If you guys are interested in that, drop us a message on Instagram or below on YouTube. If I should be able to get the YouTube up and running. And if you got any questions for our next episode, drop us a message as well. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Cheers.
See you.
Bash.
Bye.